Welcome. In this presentation, we will learn why an accountable plan is important and how to create one for your business. The information contained here has been prepared by Civitas Strategies and is not intended to constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. The Civitas Strategies team has used reasonable efforts in collecting, preparing, and providing this information, but does not guarantee its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or currency. The publication and distribution of this information are not intended to create, and receipt does not constitute, an attorney-client or any other advisory relationship. Reproduction of this information and recording of this content, including the use of AI, are expressly prohibited. Only non-commercial uses of this work are permitted. In today's conversation, we will walk you through what accountable plans are, provide you with step-by-step instructions on how to create and put them into action for your business, and address some common mistakes. If you're running an S corporation, C corporation, or an LLC treated as S or C corporation, it's crucial to have an accountable plan in place to reimburse expenses, including the business use of your home. The good news is that setting up these plans is straightforward. An accountable plan offers business owners a way to be reimbursed for business expenses without incurring taxes. With this plan, you can submit expenses, such as travel costs or other business-related expenses, for reimbursement. Having a plan for your business offers several benefits. For example, compliance with IRS regulations. Having an accountable plan ensures adherence to IRS regulations for reimbursing business expenses, reducing the risk of penalties and interest. This includes the business use of your home, which can be a large deduction. Tax savings and deductions. With an accountable plan, reimbursement for business expenses is excluded from your taxable income. This reduces your tax liability and allows the business to deduct these expenses on their tax returns. Creating an accountable plan for your business is a straightforward process that starts with familiarizing yourself with the IRS guidelines. A few key points to consider include: business purpose. The IRS requires that expenses reimbursed under an accountable plan have a clear business purpose. This means the expenses must be directly related to the business operations and be deemed necessary and ordinary in the context of the industry. Substantiation. To qualify for reimbursement, you must provide proper documentation to substantiate expenses. This includes keeping receipts, invoices, or other records that detail the nature, date, amount, and business purpose of each expense. It's important to establish clear policies outlining the documentation requirements to ensure compliance. Timely reporting. Promptly record and report their expenses. The IRS typically considers a reasonable reporting period to be within 60 days after the expense is incurred. Delays in reporting may result in the expense being disqualified from reimbursement under the accountable plan. Excess reimbursement. Any excess reimbursement or advance payments received should be returned to the business in a timely manner. You are required to repay the excess amount within a reasonable time frame, typically within 120 days after the expense was paid or incurred. No profits or losses. The IRS guidelines stipulate that an accountable plan should not result in a financial gain or loss. In other words, you should be reimbursed for the exact amount you spent, without making a profit from the reimbursement. Next, assess your business needs and determine which expenses are eligible for reimbursement. Develop a written policy that outlines the details of your plan, including eligible expenses, documentation requirements, and reimbursement procedures. Next, assess your business needs and determine which expenses are eligible for reimbursement. Develop a written policy that outlines the details of your plan, including eligible expenses, documentation requirements, and reimbursement procedures. Here are several components typically included in an accountable plan. First is the introduction. Explain the purpose of the accountable plan and the types of expenses that will be reimbursed. Also include eligible expenses. List the types of expenses that will be reimbursed, such as travel expenses, client resource expenses, and equipment or supplies expenses. Be sure to include any specific limitations or exclusions. Next, record-keeping requirements. Specify the documentation that you must maintain to support your reimbursement requests. For example, receipts or expense reports that include the date, amount, and business purpose of each expense. And finally, reimbursement procedures. Outline the process, including the forms that must be completed and the timeframe for submitting reimbursement requests. What does an accountable plan look like? In the example shown here, you can see the different components of the accountable plan. The written policy, business-related expenses, the expense reimbursement process, substantiation of expenses, timely reimbursement, returning excess reimbursements, and tax compliance. Let's look at each of these. 1. Written policy. The Nurturing Doula establishes a written accountable plan that outlines the rules and guidelines for business expense reimbursements. The plan provides clear instructions on the types of expenses eligible for reimbursement, the documentation required, and the process for submitting reimbursement requests. 2. Business-related expenses. Under the accountable plan, the Nurturing Doula will be reimbursed for reasonable and necessary expenses incurred while performing business duties. These expenses may include travel expenses, supplies and equipment, lodging, transportation, and other business-related costs. 3. Expense reimbursement process. A detailed expense report must be submitted within a reasonable period after incurring the expenses, typically within 30 days. The report should include the date, description, and purpose of each expense, along with any supporting documentation such as receipts or invoices. 4. Substantiation of expenses. Adequate substantiation must be provided for each expense incurred. This includes providing original receipts, invoices, or other valid proof of payment. The Nurturing Doula requires employees to keep accurate records and documentation to support their expense claims. 5. Timely reimbursement. Once the expense report is submitted and approved, the Nurturing Doula will issue the reimbursement for the documented expenses in a reasonable timeframe. The reimbursement will be based on the actual expenses incurred and supported by valid documentation. 6. Return of excess reimbursements. If an advance or overpayment that exceeds the actual expenses incurred, the excess amount must be returned to the Nurturing Doula within a specified timeframe. This ensures that reimbursements do not exceed the actual expenses paid. 7. Tax compliance. The Nurturing Doula follows all applicable tax laws and regulations when implementing the accountable plan. This includes excluding the reimbursed amounts from the taxable income, as long as the expenses meet the IRS requirements for business-related expenses. Remember, don't be afraid to consult with a tax professional or accountant who can provide personalized guidance based on your business's needs. If you have questions or concerns, they can help you navigate the process and ensure that your accountable plan is set up correctly. Once your plan is drafted, it is time to communicate the plan to anyone that will be reimbursed by your business and establish process for submitting expense reports and supporting documentation. A signed agreement should be obtained acknowledging understanding of the terms of the accountable plan and compliance with its requirements. Once you've rolled out your plan, consider conducting periodic audits to review documentation, verify expenses, and reconcile reimbursements to ensure compliance with IRS regulations. Finally, make sure that you regularly review and update the plan to reflect any changes in IRS regulations or company policies. This can involve consulting with a tax professional, conducting periodic assessments of the plan's effectiveness, and communicating any updates or changes to everyone who may submit expense to your business. There are some common mistakes that businesses make when creating an accountable plan. Business owners often forget or don't realize the accountable plan needs to conform to IRS guidance on expenses even though they are paid through the accountable plan. To comply with IRS regulations, an accountable plan must only reimburse expenses that have 1. A business connection. Expenses reimbursed under the accountable plan must have a clear business connection. They should be incurred while performing job duties or in connection with the trade or business. With items that are shared business and personal use, there must be a clear, fair way of determining which portion is for business and only reimburse that part. 2. Substantiation. It is important to provide adequate substantiation for each expense, including documentation such as receipts, invoices, or other valid proof of payment. The documentation should sufficiently support the amount, time, place, and business purpose of the expense. 3. Timely reporting. Expense reports should be submitted within a reasonable period after incurring the expenses, typically within 30 days. Late submissions may not qualify for tax-exempt reimbursement. Implementing an accountable plan is a smart move for businesses who want to reimburse business expenses while adhering to IRS guidelines. By following the steps outlined above and adopting best practices for managing the plan, business owners can save on taxes and stay compliant. If you need assistance, consider reaching out to small business development centers, industry associations, or checking online resources like the IRS website for guidance and to customize the plan to fit your specific needs. Looking for more info? For more information about the New Jersey Doula Initiative, reach out to NJ Doula at civstrat.com or go to njdoulabusinessresources.com. There you'll find access to free resources to support your doula business. And be sure to visit the Civitas Strategies YouTube channel for more valuable resources to support you and your business.